So let us see an example so that we'll make ourselves familiar with the log-based recovery techniques. So again, we consider a simplified banking system, and we have two transactions, T0 and T1. So transaction T0 is used to transfer $50 from account A to account B, right? So you are going to debit $50 from account A, and you are going to credit $50 to account B. And transaction T1 is used to withdraw $100 from account C, right? So I hope you are able to visualize how a transaction is being written. So it's quite simple, right? So you are going to debit $50 from account A, and you are going to credit $50 into account B, right? So you are going to read the value of account A, you are going to perform a debit operation, you are going to update the value of account A after the debit operation. Again, you are going to read the account B, you are going to credit $50 into account B, and you are going to update the value of account B after the credit operation. And T1 is the other transaction that is running concurrently, which withdraws $100 from account C, right? Again, it should be able to read the values of account C, which is going to be in the variable C, read of C. Then you are going to debit $100 from account C, and you are going to write the updated values of uh, the data item into the memory, right? So write of C is used to update the value of the data item capital C. So the initial values of accounts A, B, and C are going to be $1,000, $2,000, and $700 respectively, right? Now we are going to use the log file, and we'll be using the functions redo and undo to perform log-based recovery, right? So let us convert this transactions into a set of log-based records, right? So the first step is that given two transactions T0 and T1, we are going to convert them. So whenever there are some write operations being done in a database by a transaction, what we do is that we are going to record it in a log file, right? So this is how the equivalent log-based log file for this transaction, right? So we have two transaction. So the first transaction, right? So T0 starts, right? So T0 starts, right? So you are going to use the log based record, right? So Ti, Xj, V1 and V2. So we are working with a transaction T0, right? So transaction T0, and the data item is going to be capital A. So the initial value of the data item is going to be $1,000, and once the debit operation is performed, the new value is going to be $950, right? So Ti, Xj, V1 and V2, right? So at the end of the transaction, during the like the first operation, whenever you perform a debit operation, it's going to be T0, data item is going to be A. So initial value of A is going to be $1,000, and the new value of Xj, V2 is going to be $950. And again, you have the second log record, which corresponds to the reading the value of data item capital B, right? So it's going to be again T0, data item is going to be capital B. So the initial value is going to be 2000, the updated value is going to be 2050, right? So you have T0 commit operation, and then you have again transaction T1 starts, right? So again you have transaction identifier, data item, old value of the data item and new value of the data item. So T1 is the transaction identifier, the data item is going to be C, the old value of the data item is going to be $700, and the new value of the data item is going to be $600. And then you have this T1 commit operation, right? So this is how a log file is generated once you are going to execute this operations or transactions T0 and T1 on a database, right? So in the log-based recovery scheme, we'll be using two procedures to perform the recovery operation, right? So similar to any simple editor, any operation, we have this redo operation and undo operation. So redo of transaction TI means so you are going to set the value of all the data items updated by the transaction TI to the new values. Whereas undo of transaction TI means we are going to restore all the values of the data items to the two procedures will be able to implement a log based recovery scheme, right? So redo means we are going to update the values of the data items that is being updated by transaction TI to the new values. Whereas if you are going to use the procedure undo of TI means we are going to the ignore the things that has been done to a particular data item, and you are going to restore the old values to the data items. So let us see how to use this two procedures, redo and undo, in log based recovery. So right, so this is the state of the system log and database corresponding to T0 and T1, right? So you have log file T0 start, T0A 1915, right, T0B 2050, T0 commit, right? So at this point, the value of the variable A is equal to 950 and variable B is equal to 250. And only when the transaction T0 commits, the values will be reflected in the variable, right? So once you carry out this T0 commit alone, the values of the data item capital A and capital B will be updated, right? Similarly, T1 start, T1 data item capital C 700, the initial value of the data item before the debit operation, and 600 is going to be the new value of the data item capital C after the debit operation, right? So now the value of the variable C is going to be 600. Once T1 performs commit operation, then only the value is being updated, right? So let us see three cases, right? So what happens whenever there is a failure, right? Whenever there is a failure, what happens when a failure occurs during the first case, right? So a transaction started, transaction T0, it has performed update operation on data item capital A, and it has performed right credit operation on data item capital B, and there is a failure, right? So in this first case, what happens? So let me take you to the first case. So assume that the crash occurs after the log record for the step right of B operation of transaction T0 has been written to the stable storage, right? So right of B operation has been done in the case A, but the transaction T0 is not committed, right? So what happens is that when the system performs backup operation, it finds that the record T0 stored in the log, but there is no corresponding T0 commit or T0 abort record, right? So hence the transaction T0 must be undone. So an undo of transaction T0 is performed, right? So as a result, the values in accounts A and B on the disk are restored to $1,000 and $2,000 respectively, right? So this is the log file. So whenever a database failure occurs, right? So you are going to recover the database by means of this log file. So here the log file, you scan the log file and you find out there is a transaction T0 start, log record is there. Then you have the first log record, which is used to denote a debit operation, and the second log record T0B 2050, which denotes a credit operation into account capital B or data item capital B. There is no corresponding commit or rollback, right? There is no corresponding commit log record. So what we do is that once a system breaks down due to some power failure or hardware failure, so whenever you need to recover, you scan the log file and you find it out that the transaction T0 is not committed, right? So what we do is that we undo the values of we undo the values of capital A and B to its data item to its old values. So the values of data items A and B will be $1,000 and $2,000 respectively, right? Now we look into the second case, right? The subdivision B, where a transaction T0 has started. It has performed some debit operation on data item capital A, and it has performed a credit operation on data item capital B. There is a log record T0 commit, which means that the changes are made permanent to the database. So we are going to make the changes permanent to the database as well as the disk file for transaction T0. And if you look into the transaction T1 starts. So T1 updates the value of the data item as capital C, right? So the old value of the data item capital C is going to be $700. The new value is going to be $600. However, it does not contain any commit operation, right? So now the failure has occurred at this point of time. So transaction T0 has been successfully executed and transaction T1 has started. It has performed some operation, but the changes has not been committed to the database, right? So this, on looking into this log file, so what we'll do is that we'll perform two different operations, or we'll execute two different procedures. One will be redo of transaction T0 and other will be undo of transaction T1, right? So why do we do redo of transaction T0 procedure? So here for the transaction T0 start, you have an corresponding transaction T0 commit. So you are expected to update the value of the data items capital A and capital B to its new values, right? So once the system performs a log-based recovery, it scans the log records. It finds that the transaction T0 was successfully executed, and the changes that made by the transaction T0 are written onto the database system after the commit operation. So you need to perform redo of transaction T0 so that the values of accounts A and B will be $950 and $2,050 respectively. Whereas it scans the next log record T1 start and it does not find any T1 commit, right? So here it will perform an undo operation, and here the value of the data item C will be restored to its old values, $700, right? Right. So now let us the second case. Right. So second case, now let us assume that the crash occurs just after the log record for the step write of C of transaction T1 has been written to the stable storage, right? So the database crash occurs after the write of C operation has been performed onto the stable storage. So when the system comes for backup, two recovery operations needs to be done, right? So the operation undo of T1 must be performed. since the record T1 start appears in the log, but there is no record corresponding to T1 commit or T1 abort, right? So you have transaction T1 start is there, but there is no corresponding T1 commit or T1 abort. So what we do is that we undo this transaction T1, and we are going to restore the data item to its old values, which is going to be $700. Whereas if you look into the transaction T0, the operation redo transaction T0 must be performed since the log file contains both the record T0 start and the record T0 commit, right? So at the end of this recovery procedure, log-based recovery procedure, the values of accounts A, B, and C will be $950, $2,050, and $700 respectively, right? So we have carried out undo T1 operation since T1 started, but we have a record T1 start is there, but there is no corresponding T1 commit or T1 abort is there. We are expected to perform undo of T1, which means that we are going to restore the value of the data item C to its old values. And if the backup operation, the log-based recovery operation, it looks into the transaction T0. So T0 start, it log record, it has also an T0 commit operation log record is present in the log file. So it means that we are going to update the values of data item A and B has been successfully carried out. So we are going to perform this redo of transaction T0, by which the values of the data item capital A and capital B are updated to its new values, $950 and $2,050 respectively, right? So finally, the last case. So C, subdivision C. So a transaction T0 has started execution. Transaction T0 has performed two operations. One debit operation on data item capital A, and other is going to be credit operation on data item capital B, right? Then transaction T0 has been committed. The changes have been made permanent to the database. Then the transaction T1 starts. So T1 again, it's going to perform a debit operation on a data item capital C. So the updated value of C is going to be $600, and T1 commits, right? So both the transaction has been committed, and there happens an system failure, right? Now what will happen when you perform log-based recovery? So what operations should you do when you perform log-based recovery? Subramaniam? Subramanian?
Yes, sir. Can you repeat the question, sir?
Right. So the case, so we were discussing about a case C where transaction T1, transaction T0 starts. It has performed two operations, namely debit operation and credit operation. Transaction T0 is committed. Again, transaction T1 starts. You are going to perform only debit operation on the data item capital C, and T1 is committed. Now there is a failure. So both the transactions T0 and T1 are executed, and both the transaction T0 and T1, they are committed. Now there is a system failure. So what will happen when we perform a log-based recovery technique? So we have only two procedures, right? Redo and undo. So what will you do in
Yes.
this?
Sir, I think we have to undo the changes.
So why should you undo the changes? Here we have to execute only two redo operations. Redo of transaction T0 and redo of transaction T1, right? So once a failure occurs, you have to recover from the failure. So the system it scans through the log records, it finds that for the transaction T0 start, there is a corresponding T0 commit. And similarly, for the transaction T1 start, there is a log record T1 commits. It looks like both the transactions have done some changes that are made permanent to the database. So in this case, I will be performing both redo operation on transaction T0 and redo operation on transaction T1, so that the values of data items A, B, and C will be $950, $2,050, and $600 respectively, right? So you can follow it, right, Subramaniam?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Right. So case A, we are going to perform undo operation on T0.
T0.
Case B, we are going to perform
Undo on T1.
Undo on T1 and redo on
T0.
T0.
And case 3, since the failure has occurred after both T0 has committed and T1 committed, we are going to perform redo of T0
and T1.
and redo of T1, right? So in the book, they have taken this snapshot. They have discussed what operations you have to be done, right? So finally, the last case, finally, let us assume that the crash occurs after the log record T1 of commit has been written to the stable storage. So when the system comes for backup operation, both the transactions T0 and T1 needs to be redone. So since the records T0 start and T0 commit appears in the log, and as do the records T1 start and T1 commit. So after the system performs the recovery procedure, redo of T0 and redo of T1, the values in accounts A, B, and C are going to be $950, $2,050, and $600 respectively, right? So again, I feel that it's a very simple model. You have only these two procedures: redo of transaction Ti and undo of transaction Ti. So undo means it will restore, like your Word document, you have this undo redo operation. Undo means it will restore to its old values, right? So it will restore the values of all the data items to its old values, whereas redo means will be restoring the data item to its new values, right? So this is how you perform a log based recovery. So the thing you need to know is that you need to know the syntax of a log record: TI, XJ, V1, and V2. So TI is the unique identity of the transaction that performs some read or write operation. XJ is going to be the data item on which you are going to perform the write operation, right? So we are going to record only the write operations. So TI, transaction ID, unique transaction ID of the transaction that performs the write operation. XJ is the data item on which we are going to perform the write operation. V1 is going to be the old value of the data item, and V2 is going to be the new value of the data item, right? So once you know this log record, the additional log records available in this log based recovery are going to be TI start, which denotes the start of your transaction; TI commit, which means that the changes are made permanent to the database; and TI abort, right? So these are the other log records significant to record the significant events during that happens during a transaction processing, right? So whenever a transaction performs a write operation, you are going to generate a log file, right? So the log record is of the format TI, XJ, V1, V2, which means that the transaction TI has performed a write operation on the data item XJ, and V1 is the old value of the data item before the write operation, and V2 is the new value of the data item after the write operation. So we have a simplified example, like whenever we discuss something log based protocol or any protocol, we'll discuss with an example. So you have two transactions. One is debit, one transaction T0 debit $50 from account A, and it credits it into account B, right? So the transaction T1, it's going to debit $100 from account C, right? So the initial values of accounts A, B, and C are going to be $1,000, $2,000, and $700 respectively. So you are going to represent this by means of a log records. T0 start, T0 A, initial value was $1,000 for the variable A, and the new value is going to be $950 and so on. So this log record you should generate corresponding to this transaction, right? So whenever there is a write operation, you are going to generate a log record of this format: T0 start, T0 A, $1,000, $950, T0 B, $2,000, $2,050, T0 commit, and so on. So the recovery scheme, it's quite simple. It uses only two procedures: redo of transaction TI and undo of transaction TI. So undo of transaction TI means we are going to restore the old values to the data items, whereas redo of TI means you are going to update the data items that are being modified by the transaction TI to some new values. Right, so you have three different cases on which you are going to apply this log based recovery scheme. So the case A, whenever a system performs a log based recovery, it scans the log records. It finds out that there is a transaction T0 start, there is a log record T0 start. However, there is no T0 commit or a T0 rollback. So we are going to do only undo operation. So undo of transaction T0 is performed, and the values of accounts A and B will be A, B, and C will be $1,000, $2,000, and $700 respectively. And second case, you have T0 start and T0 commit. So you need to perform redo operation, where we'll be updating the values of the data items A and B. And for T1 start, you don't have T1 commit, so you will be performing undo operation on transaction T1. And finally, the last case, you have your transaction T0 start log record, and you have your T0 commit log record. Similarly, you have T1 start log record, and you have your T1 commit record. So if a failure occurs after T1 commit operation has been executed, so we'll be executing only the procedure redo of T0 and redo of T1, and the values of accounts A, B, and C will be $950, $2,050, and $600 respectively, right? So by which we will be able to recover a system. So right, so by using this log based recovery system, you will be able to recover a system even if there is any transaction failure, right? So this is about log based recovery system. So maybe next class I will teach you shadow paging. I will discuss with 4NF and 5NF, and we'll complete unit 4. Right, so we are well ahead of schedule, right? I think I may be needing another 6 to 7 classes to complete unit 5. I will teach you NoSQL in unit 5 in addition to whatever topics available. So this week we'll work with PHP and SQL. So maybe next week, next class, I will teach you how to work with some basic. I will teach you some basic commands in PHP hypertext preprocessor, so that you will be able to work with PHP and SQL in today's in this week lab class, right? So that's it for today's class. Any questions from the participants?
No, sir, no doubt.
Right. So that
No doubt, sir.
we'll discuss about working with PHP and SQL. Thank you.
Thank you,
Thank
sir.
you, sir.